Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to empower you, bringing you topics and guests that will take you and your business to the next level. Today, I am really excited to have with me Doctors Kim and Todd Saxton, and let me tell you about them. So, Kim and Todd are award-winning professors at Indiana University's Kelley School of Business, as well as co-authors of The Titanic Effect. The book is a practical guide to help startups, founders, as well as their investors and supporters practically and successfully, I can almost say that, navigate the icebergs
It's a mouthful.
Yes, that so often sink the startups in the ideation and early stages of development. They'll tap into decades of academic and professional experience in business strategy, entrepreneurship, marketing, market research, and venture funding startups to help you navigate the debtbergs that so often sink early stage startups. So today, I thought it would be great to talk about ways to limit hidden debts in startup development. So please join me in welcoming my guests, Doctors Todd and Kim Saxton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, and welcome all.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. We appreciate the invitation.
Yes, I thought that the book's premise was really interesting, and I have a background with franchising, and we often advise the franchisees to sort of set expectations that those early stages, you're not going to be bringing in a lot of personal profit because all your money is going to be reinvested back in the business. And then you have all those things. So maybe 3 to 5 years before you actually start to see some success. And I think it's always important to know that because your mindset
Right.
can be a deterrent as well as all the other things that might come your way. So I thought it was really important that you come on the show and share all of your insights.
Yeah, so Vicki, I would just add that, I mean, a franchise, if it's only 3 to 5 years, it's because like the system's already been codified, there's rules to follow, you have standard operating procedures. Startups, it's not unusual to see the 16-year startup that has no profit yet. So it's a much slower path to profit most of the time. Not always. There's some quote unquote overnight successes. Of course, there's probably 2 decades of failures that led to that final success.
So true.
As Kim said, kind of in our vernacular, with a franchise, you've at least limited some of the uncertainty. Definitely not all, and as you note, it takes a while to really kind of hit your stride. But think about all the additional uncertainty when you don't have any kind of playbook to rely on. So that's the essence and premise of our book.
And I think also that speaks to the value and benefit of having coaches that have expertise in certain areas that maybe you're weak in. I have 40 years of working in corporate, but I still sought out coaches because I knew there were things that I didn't know. And also just to have someone that's been there, walk in those shoes for a little while that could advise you. So, I always read a lot of books, but I think it's also helpful to have, people like yourselves that can give that conversation and discussion as to maybe keeping you from jumping off the ledge.
Yeah. And I think coaches and mentors are also important. I mean, not everybody has to be, a paid coach, but I think about, I did a women's leadership program through the university. And one of the things we did is just have a group of, 12 women meet for breakfast once a month during the program. And I mean, it was amazing that, someone would say, well, my boss said blah, blah, blah to me, and I'm just struggling to deal with it. And everybody else is like, wait, stop the presses. Your boss said what to you? Do you know that that's unacceptable? Oh, what do you mean it's unacceptable? I mean, if you feel bad, but isn't that what all bosses do? No. So the greatest power of that was having other people who are objective, being able to step back and help you see the situation and its possibilities in a different light.
Yeah, having that community. So before we get even further into this, I'd love for you to share where you are from. Where do you live?
So we live in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that's the capital for the state, and in Central, it's a lot of people know it for the Indy 500. And yeah, we've been here 27 years.
Yes.
So, but we're originally from the East Coast. I grew up in Florida, went to school in Boston. We met outside DC. We lived outside Philly. And then for education, we came out to the Midwest, and we've stayed here since.
We're both at the IU Kelley School of Business. We are on the Indianapolis campus, which helps manage many of our graduate professional programs. So evening MBA students who are working during the day, our physician MBA. We have a certificate program for healthcare providers trying to bolster their business education. So mostly dealing with experienced folks.
That's great. That's great. A Pittsburgh girl here. So
nice.
And my aunt is a graduate of IUP too. So she went to Indiana University. She ended up being a principal after many years of teaching. So
nice.
Yeah.
Tough job.
We think
we appreciate that.
We think more of Pittsburgh from our vacations. We love to vacation down in Ohiopyle with the rapids and the bike trails and the Allegheny Passage and all that.
Oh, cool. All right. So what are the sources of failures for startups, and really how can those startups avoid them?
Well, we should probably share the genesis of our book was almost 20 years of advising startups and starting to hear the same mistakes over and over again. And being like, oh, we know this situation. We've heard it before. And that's what led to us to write this. There's, I think, roughly 32 kind of mistakes that we highlight that people can avoid. But I'll let Todd talk a little bit about the domains.
Yeah, so the way we frame it, we use the Titanic as kind of the metaphor and the iceberg. So the whole book is kind of written as a journey through these different oceans of potential hidden debts. One of those being human, and that's one of the first ones, is who are your co-founders? How do you structure equity? How do you bring other people on board? What kind of advisors and investors do you work with? We certainly see that as a major category early on. And then Kim's bailiwick, the marketing side of things. What does the competition look like? What do the customers look like? How do you approach them to learn about the problem through their eyes, as opposed to going to try and sell them a solution before maybe you really understand the problem from their perspective. Certainly the technical ocean is a big one in terms of how you develop your technology. And some of your listeners might be familiar with the term technical debt, which is you have to make decisions early on about the tech platform without knowing how necessarily the customers can use it or where it's going to go. And that can create debt that you have to later go back and recreate, rebuild, or at best fix to be able to continue to grow. And then the strategy ocean is the fourth one that kind of helps connect the dots between the other three to make sure that you are pacing your funding, your strategy for moving into the market, and how you talk to customers, communicate your value proposition, and make sure that the technical side is able to actually deliver on it as the startup moves forward.
Awesome. So if you have identified these debts, then is there any roadmap that you that might be the best way to do. You've outlined all these different potentials. What would you suggest maybe be the first 2 or 3 things that you do to set you up to maybe be able to navigate beyond or around some of those others?
Yeah, so in the book, we do go over every single debtberg and how to navigate around it. What are the alternatives? And then we do provide some integrating frameworks so that it's like, all right, so let's look across all the marketing problems. Which ones do I pay attention to at what stage in the venture? And, you know, because some of them are more tactical and some of them are more strategic. But this is a pretty common idea in startups, and yet we just think it's one of the hardest ones that we see companies struggle with, which is the biggest problem. The number one reason that startups go under is that there's no market need for their product. It continues in survey after survey and postmortem after postmortem, is that you're just offering something that is not of the value required to cover its costs. So it's not that people don't like it, it's that, you know, they don't like it at that cost. And that's because people, by and large, are creatures of habit, and they need some pretty overwhelming improvements to make a change. And so we highly recommend, as do several other programs associated with startups, is that you go to your customers and find and discover what their most important pain points are, the ones they're willing to pay for, and you design a solution to those instead of what you perceive to be their problems.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I know for one of my businesses is to help you be more engaging and overcome your fear of public speaking. And a lot of times people try to do it on their own, but they just can't make the dent or the progress. They just need that bolstering of their confidence and such. And so at some point, you know, they'll be willing to pay for it, but sadly, it's after many, many years of pain and agony.
Well, and so stepping back a little bit, a big message of our book is we don't have the silver bullet or the 32 silver bullets for every one of these. The founders need to understand that they are making choices under uncertainty, and there are trade-offs involved. And what we're trying to do is help them limit the damage and hopefully not sink their ship, but they're still going to make mistakes. If they go into those decisions with a little better sense of what those trade-offs might be and what the ramifications might be of those decisions, we think they'll be better prepared. And especially related to your audience and the theme of your podcast and some of your other guests, being a leader in that context is really challenging. And we see folks who kind of two ends of the continuum. One is big imposter syndrome. They blame themselves for every decision they make that doesn't work out right. The other is they pull out the finger and point at everybody else. So they blame everything on everybody else. And the reality is, you know, as a startup, you're making these decisions without full information, and you don't, and your team doesn't understand what could result from that. And that's okay. You still need to keep the ship floating.
Yeah. And I think that one of the things that you said, Kim, earlier, we should touch a little bit on. You talked about the tactical and the strategic. And I think too often, a lot of we entrepreneurs go into it with a great operational background. That's why, you know, that's why we're the expert at this. And then all of a sudden now we have to think strategically, and we have to really look at big picture and not put the blame on, understand that, you know, there are going to be failures. So talk a little bit about that, debtberg, where you really need to change your mindset to be a true leader of your organization.
I'll give you a great example that someone reached out to me last week or maybe early this week and said, "Oh, Kim, I wanted to give you some feedback. I just had this great conversation with somebody, and it reminded me that I never told you about 4 years ago when you said this to me." And this person had come to me and said, "I want to start a business. I have these 2 partners. I'm going to keep 40%. I'm going to give each of them 30%. And I said, "Okay, that's a tactic. Okay. But let's like step back and ask about the strategy of why do you think you should be giving away equity to partners at this point in time? Oh,
Yeah.
they're really good people. They're going to help. We're all in this together. We've agreed. I'm like, okay, who put up the money? Oh, I'm putting up all the money. Okay. Again, strategically remind me why we have these partners. And also, by the way, they can overbid you because they have 60%, you have
60.
40%.
Yeah.
So I think, first of all, I mean, I would ask myself some hard questions about giving away any equity at this point and having any partners. Because if you want to move and it's your money, then you should be able to make decisions. But if you are, then you should definitely keep 60% of the equity for yourself. And she says, it's taken me 4 years to get rid of my partners.
Oh,
I didn't listen. And it's taken me 4 years. And that was the worst choice I made right at the beginning. I was like,
Well, and
sorry.
those were probably really good friendships that got
Right.
destroyed. Very,
yeah.
right. And that's the genesis of the idea, and the starting team is often people who are family members or friends or colleagues that you actually really enjoy and are excited to work with. And then because of the lack of structural, so that's one, it's certainly not a silver bullet, but that we talk about in the book is just use vesting, right? Say, okay, your target is X% over time, but you earn that through hitting milestones and through the venture moving through these
Yeah.
milestones. And it's such a simple solution to divvy out the ownership or equity piece of the company over a period of time when you actually make progress. And I think people feel this need to assign 100% of the pie before they've even gone to the store and bought the flour and the eggs, you know, and it's like, just take your time, hold on.
Yeah.
Plus, it
So
feels great when you earned that stuff over time. I mean, think about how many moments of celebration are available if you are vesting over 5 years or something like that, because it's a tangible payoff and reward for the hard work you've done. And the brain loves rewards. So I'm always like hold stuff back and dribble out rewards over time.
Yeah, that's absolutely a great idea. The other piece of that, I guess, is to know who you're going to be bringing in, building those relationships. So, okay, for this person, that reward may be one thing, but not for the other person. And understanding that, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great leadership quality right there.
Yeah. So what's the best product development approach whenever you do have technical debt?
Well, so we talk about the overspend and overbuild and overspend debtberg, which in the technical ocean is where you see an opportunity and you spend, $200 or $300 building this app that you can take and put in front of someone, and they come back and say that doesn't solve the problem that I have, or that's not how I think about the problem. So it's really very much related to what Kim was talking about in terms of customer discovery, is that before you invest a lot in developing something, really understand the problem that you're solving, but also build, we refer to it as a very lean kind of upfront model. It may even be, pen and paper or a spreadsheet. Just, one quick example, we had some alums who wanted to start a business. They saw great potential. All their friends and family members, oh, this is a great idea. And it was going to be, when you're making family meals, you just make an extra set or two, and then you coordinate and share, and you use this app to kind of coordinate the meal making activities so that you can spread it over a larger base. And when you are making, you make for more people.
You sell it.
And you sell it, and that'd be great. And they were going to invest, I think it was 150,000 into an app to be able to move this forward. We said, just start a text thread and with your friends to say, okay, we're going to run a 3-month, and let's see what happens. Well, they tried that and came back and said, oh, wow. Because of the kids' strong preferences and food allergies, and we have one, person that is vegan, and it's there was just no way to make it work. It was like, yep, that's why you don't invest.
And it didn't cost you a dime.
Yeah, exactly. So lean solution up front to make sure you understand and how people might use it, or if they might use it.
My favorite is somebody who went to an accelerator, got $50,000 to build a race car wheel that you could put your tablet or phone in so that you could play games with a race car wheel, and it's like right there. And spent the 50,000 to build it, and then nobody wanted their device in the thing. And all you had to do was mock up cardboard, and like, tell me what you like about this. And so, I mean, it's really like start small. What's the minimum I have to do to prototype this and figure out what's required? Because whatever you build first is not going to work perfectly, and you're going to retool it. And so, start really small.
And if we take it to, a different level from product development, but still technology, is a lot of times businesses that have technology that will help us be more efficient, maybe promoting to the startup, the new entrepreneurs, where they're not really at that level that they need that. And yet they have that FOMO, like, well, if that person's making this much money and they're using that, I should do that so I make that much money. In the meantime, you've used all your profit for the next 5 years to pay for that.
Right. There's a lot, the same happens like in marketing, and people are like, oh, I want to get into social media marketing. Let me buy all these tools. And I'm like, or you could just like try doing it by hand for a little while and see how bad it is, and then discover how much it's worth to you. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, the tools can be really helpful, but they're just tools. You still have to do all the hard work.
Yeah. Know when to use them. And the other piece that goes back to what we were earlier talking about, tactical versus strategic, when do you as a startup know when it's time to get someone to do the marketing, someone to do the admin stuff, someone to do the technology stuff, and no longer have your fingers in it as the doer, but more just the overseer, advisor, guide?
Yeah, and we do cover when to hire the first person. I mean, that's a hard choice, right? So what the decision criteria to think about as to when you hire somebody. And also, often early on, you're just better off getting a fractional marketing person. I mean, what happens is you just have no marketing person, which is also terrible, than necessarily investing a lot in marketing. It's about, a lot of these choices are about right sizing your investments.
Yeah.
Understanding, to your earlier point, when, for example, to separate sales versus marketing, because people kind of lump them together. Oh, we have our VP of sales and marketing. Well, they are two different skill sets, and as larger understanding that. So we kind of have a couple different milestones that we look at for progress. One of them is, do they actually have dedicated sales versus marketing people? And the other is, have they sold outside of their home state? So particularly if it's B2B, if they're simply relying on their own network in their own geographic area, that's hard to scale. But when you can start to sell to strangers, that is a really powerful kind of inflection point for many startups.
Awesome. So what are some business model alternatives that a startup could explore to really make them more scalable as we talk about scale?
Yeah, we do a nice workshop on business models. I think a lot of people get an idea and they just like implement and don't really think about, well, there's probably a half a dozen ways that you could generate revenue around any idea, right? So the obvious, you could have an annual contract, you could have a monthly contract, you could have subscriptions, you could have gift purchases, you could have memberships, you could lease something versus, buying something. And so thinking through for your particular customer and this particular business, what makes the most sense. I know a membership group that only had annual memberships, and it was something where like people would want to do this for like 6 to 9 months, discover how hard it is, go away, come back, go away, come back. So they switched to quarterly memberships, and all of a sudden, there's more churn overall, but quarterly, they actually ended up growing their membership by about 20%. So then you need to know, well, how do I manage the costs of the churn, right? And if they had gone to monthly, they might have even been more successful in terms of total numbers, but the cost of churn on a monthly basis was probably too much for them to handle. So just being willing to say, okay, this is how I thought it would be, but what else could it be? And there's, articles that go over business model. The business model canvas comes up with some examples as well. Just lots of different ways to think about it. And you have to think about, well, how much cash flow does this target customer have? At what point is the buying process becoming painful for them? And which means you taking on some more risks, right? So there's trade-offs in all of those choices.
And true, if you have the year program and people only stay for 6 months, it's really impacting your brand because, they may or may not come back, but they may tell someone, well, I was in it, didn't really, it was, but in the 3-month program, you could see small wins to be able to impact your brand positively.
Yeah.
Another example I think is apropos here. I was on the board of and president of the Venture Club of Indiana for a number of years, and the board was very concerned when I first joined because membership was declining, and rather than just look at the absolute numbers and percent of people who were renewing, we said, okay, let's look at kind of the leading indicators versus lagging indicators and who we want. Because in that kind of organization, you expect churn from the entrepreneurs. They come to the organization when they're launching, developing their ideas. They need help, they need resources, they need perhaps team members, but you expect them to hopefully be successful enough that they can't leave their, their startup for to go to lunch every month because they're knee deep in it. But what we were seeing a decline in were actually the investors. And those are the people who you want to join for a long period of time and stay committed. And in fact, if you looked at the numbers over the years, the investors were a leading indicator of how many entrepreneurs actually joined. So when you start to see a fall off in investors, the next year is when you saw overall membership and particularly entrepreneurs decline. So understanding kind of the cause effect of those relationships, recognizing there are segments within your customers where you're going to see a lot of churn, but who are the ones that you want to make sure you're retaining, that are renewing, whatever that looks like, and how do you track that?
That's awesome. So could you give us some parallels between startups and launching of the Titanic?
Yeah, so the book is full of them. Every chapter we start with some little example stories. Probably, I think one of the most interesting ones, at least to me, because I'm a marketer, but, if you think about at the time, 1912, when they were launching this, they had a very luxurious approach. I mean, in excess, almost $200,000 to go across the Atlantic in today's dollars. So like, who could afford to pay for that? Well, it turns out Americans can afford to pay for that. And so the target for the luxury class was Americans who were in Europe. But then the rest of the boat, it was as cheap as, roughly, I think it was about $200 or $300.
I think $14.
Yeah. Maybe that was $14 for the steerage. So now you're bringing people from all working class from all over Europe and Eastern Europe as well. And so like just to market to those two different groups today would be so difficult. And as a result, they were not at capacity. I mean, they were barely over 50%. I think it was like 65% capacity, because that's a really hard task to pull off. And
that's a great example. So one final question, we're running low on time, but how should or how can a startup write a positioning statement that will help market and sell, their product and service, but also maybe talk to attracting those investors that may be necessary for them?
Yeah, so the Titanic ends up being a really good example there. They built this huge boat. And so what do you think was the biggest fear or concern that people would have about getting on this boat? That it's sink.
Oh,
that big. How's it going to stay afloat, right? Right. And so it's not anywhere in any brochure or anything, but in all of the language that they spoke, they called it unsinkable. And that was to allay customer fears. And so Yeah. And so then when it sinks, right, that's sort of the worst positioning statement of like, you guarantee people that what actually happened wasn't going to happen. So that's terrible. But really what you have to do is think about what is the driving reason that people purchase something and that you can do differently and better than anyone else. And it's just that simple. What is like my favorite example is actually the cell phone. What is the most important decision criteria for buying a cell phone is that your calls go through. So, Verizon has always held the position of your call quality, your calls go through. AT&T has spent billions of dollars advertising against them and don't have the market share to show for it because they took the best positioning for cell phones.
They did too.
I think also it's important to recognize that that value proposition and that articulation unfolds, but also gets more specific over time. And one of the things we see, this is another one of those milestones of accomplishment for a startup, is when you actually say no to a customer because they're outside of your capabilities. They're not going to be happy. They're going to demand a lot of resources, and you won't get the lifetime value back in terms of payment. So making that value proposition very clear and specific, and that can mean being willing to say no to certain segments and view that as an accomplishment and a step forward, not as a failure of ability to serve everyone.
Yeah. We often talk about that on this podcast, about that you need to know what your core values are and have those be your, true north to be able to say, oh, yes, I want to work with you. No, I don't want to work with you, and be okay with that. Because I think Kim Walsh Phillips always says, I don't want to work with jerks. And for those of us that have worked in corporate for a long time and had no choice, sometimes had to work with jerks, being an entrepreneur is a great way to have that freedom of saying, yes, I know this is money that I could have in my pocket, but I don't want to have the stress and pain that money's going to cause me there.
Absolutely.
Well, it is now time for us to share my screen of the contact information. If those that are listening really have enjoyed what the conversation's been like here and know that they want to be able to connect with Doctors Todd and Kim to be able to really maybe navigate and get around all of those debts that you might have, those debtbergs. So I'm going to share my screen. If you are listening, you should have had a paper and pencil from the start to take notes. Run quick. I'm going to get on my screen now so you can get that website at least. All right. If you are listening though, and you can't, driving or something, can't get to that pen and paper, I will have all this in my show notes on my YouTube channel, Vicki Noethling. Please subscribe, as well as my findyourleadershipconfidence.com. But those that are watching or ready to go now, the website is titaniceffect.com. Titaniceffect.com. You see the picture of that wonderful book right there on screen. They're on Facebook at Michaeline Kim?
Michaeline Kim. Yep.
Michaeline Kim Saxton. And then Prof K Saxton, Prof MK IM. So Prof M Kim Saxton. They're tongue twisting me today all morning. And then the Titanic Effect 2643. And then Twitter is Prof K Saxton. So again, all that information can be found on their website as well as in the show notes. I'm going to turn it over to Todd and Kim to talk about their book and their call to action for today.
If you found any value in what we were talking about, and particularly if you're in the early stages of trying to launch, there are lots of resources out there. The Lean Startup Movement has a lot of resources that are available, but we would certainly appreciate it and hope that you might think about buying our book or buying the audiobook and listening to it. The content we think will be very helpful in at least helping you ask some of the right questions and hopefully avoiding some of the things that can hurt you. Vicki kindly shared a lot of the different contact information, and if you didn't get it, you can always search for us at Indiana University at the Kelley School of Business, and we're pretty accessible through that route. And love to hear from people, questions you have, challenges you have, and if we can be helpful, we're here.
Awesome. So I wanted to, again, thank you both for sharing so much great insights and information. I know that the audience is going to appreciate everything that you had, and I do know that I'm going to get the book. I think that it's a great tool to have in your toolbox, and want to say thanks for being wonderful guests.
Well, thank you. And if you do get the book, in the back, there's a little a self-diagnostic that you can assess where you are and what debtbergs you've taken on.
Excellent. All right. And as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey, and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.